What is the impetus in the series of works?
These paintings are autobiographical, and they come mostly from belonging to a writing group, a performing group. And I'm writing my stories of childhood that I couldn't do until I took this class. And in the process of writing, I'm remembering things, colors in the house, stories from the house, shapes and forms from the house that I'm now putting into the paintings. So they're not like an illustration of the story, but I start with typing the text up, running it through Illustrator or InDesign or something, playing with it in those programs, printing it up, and then collaging that to the canvas. So I keep the story embedded, and then paint over that and bring it back and push it forward. And then the last of these, I've actually tried to imagine the floor plan from the house. So I start off with the text from the story, making both an aerial of the floor plan and then a front-on view of the house, and then I start layering and painting from there. And I've also added, we use a lot of wallpaper. My dad was a house decorator, and we had wallpaper everywhere, and so I've been including those shapes in the painting to bring back those references too.
So what were the like your original influences for this?
For making for this series of work?
Yes.
It would have been those stories, and it would have been writing those stories. I mean, I've done paintings similar before, but they really took a turn when I started to write.
So when did all this start? Were you like doing this as a child, or when
Actually as a child I didn't have much to do with art. I was mostly writing and reading. Got A's on all my papers in the English class, and I really loved to read. I kind of lost that for a while in art school, concentrated on the visual arts. But I don't know, I went back to school. I left school at 14. I went back when I was 19 or 20, and I just happened to go into a ceramics class, and then that started me really seriously studying art, painting and drawing, and going to art school.
So what about your family? Were there other members that were artists, or?
Well, in a way, my mother was descendant of a Spanish Romany tinker, gypsy, and depending on how, if you want to be derogatory, they're a tinker, but she was part of a gypsy caravan going through this village in England, and my grandfather just lost his first wife, so he whipped this 16-year-old girl off the caravan, married her, and my mother was the offspring of that union. So I mean, she would paint our house in very un-English colors, lavenders and blues and greens, and as almost like an homage to her, when I picked these colors, I tried to think about, I started with what she would use, and then I thought, what would she like? And then when I drive around the city and I see, especially in Latino places, I see the way they paint the places, I think that's something she would have appreciated.
Yeah.
So my dad was a musician basically, but he could also sketch, and he would do cartoons and things, but just them, nobody else in the family.
So when did you decide to be an artist? Can you remember, like at the moment?
Yeah, it was actually kind of late. I mean, I did things earlier that gave me hints that maybe I should be doing this, but it wasn't until I walked into that ceramics class, and then they told me, you should apply to art school, and you should take a drawing class here, and they pushed me to do it. And I could tell in the interview right away that they rejected a lot of people, but it's not to sound arrogant, but I could tell in the interview they brought other people from the weaving department to come in and see my work, and I could tell I was accepted. And I didn't, it was a very odd feeling because I've never considered myself to be an artist. And here I was being kind of pulled in. But I'm grateful to the man that taught me ceramics, although I was never that great at ceramics, but for getting me involved in making artwork. If you're out there, Graham Flight, thank you.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. What do you think that this new work you're doing has a lot of words and letters and all that? Do you think there's any conflict in putting words into paintings?
Yeah, there's a purist ethic that writing is writing and painting is painting. So, and I in some ways agree with that, but it's a way to step up, to start the writing and work on coloring the text before I print it and cut it up. It's a way of starting a painting off. And I always make sure that you can never read the story, but you can't even read a sentence. Mm-hmm. You can maybe gather a few words. So I make it not readable. I think it's always a problem when paintings have text in it, you can read the whole text. Because we're human and we're going to do that. Whether the artist says, I don't intend for you to read it, we're going to read it. So the constructivists took text in a graphic way and cut it up, and it wasn't readable. And I would say more recently, Ed Ruscha used single words that were sort of drawn monumentally, or you weren't reading the words, you were looking at the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So that's the way I like to work.
Yeah, it just becomes like a design element.
It becomes a part of the painting, rather than you're reading the word in the context of a sentence or even a paragraph or a story. Mm-hmm. So
how would you define your painting style then?
Autobiographical and gestural, and there's always a challenge. I worked as a welder as a teenager, and everything was about precision and cutting just right, which sort of tightened me up a little bit. So I think as an older person, and I'm older, it's always been a struggle to sort of break down the straight line and go over the edge and things. So that's always part of the way I make work.
So what's the most challenging part then of making art, do you think, today?
Time, absolutely. Finding time. And right now, what's the irony is, I love my job. It gives me a chance to curate shows, but I would use the word fertile in terms of ideas for my work now. I forget them. I try to put a notebook down, and I've got directions to go in, and they take me months to do each single piece. So I forget. I wish I had more time.
So what drives you to continue to make art with all these time constraints and everything else?
I don't know. I have to do it. I have to write something down. I have to paint it, and it's a compulsion. So maybe ego a bit. I'm not sure. Maybe ego.
So why abstraction? It's most of your work is, there's no figures in it or whatever. It's all, this whole abstract thing, which is really quite wonderful. But I was
right.
wondering
No, I think
coming from.
Some people say it's easier, and in some ways it is. I kind of agree, because anybody that can render a figure and get that all right, but they can do that, and then it can be totally cold because it's just academic. But the people that can add a personal expression into that and be a bit looser, I think it's great. Whenever I've tried it, I've never been satisfied with the way the figures look. I'm not that good at it in lots of ways, and I'm not that good at leaving it gestural and kind of messy in the way I am with abstraction. So, and it's always seemed like, especially if I'm working off a story, if I work in a figurative way, then it's more like an illustration of the story. And I'm definitely trying to avoid that. In fact, I would say that the end result of the painting, in the end, has not much to do with the story. It's a stepping stone. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that'll do it for today, Mr. Trevor.
All right, Mr. Saban.
Thank you
very much.